The notification lit up my Apple Watch during AP Literature. Irregular heart rhythm detected. It is recommended you contact your doctor. I stared at the screen while Mrs. Chen discussed Victorian poetry. My pen frozen above my notebook. The watch had been buzzing since Monday, with warnings I'd been dismissing as glitches. High heart rate, 192 BPM. Low heart rate, 48 BPM. Irregular rhythm detected. It was December 18th, 1 week before Christmas, and I had no time for medical drama. Between final exams, my role as Clara in the Nutcracker, and helping Mom prepare for our annual Christmas Eve dinner, I'd convinced myself the watch was malfunctioning. Maybe the cold weather was affecting the sensors. I pressed my palm against my chest and felt my heart hammering erratically, unable to settle on a rhythm. Fast, then slow, then this weird flutter that stole my breath. But I was 18, healthy, a dancer. Senior year was stressful, sure, but this had to be anxiety about college applications and Juilliard. Nothing serious. By lunch, my watch had logged 19 irregular rhythm notifications. I sat in the cafeteria with my best friend Sienna, pushing around the sad excuse for a holiday meal while she complained about calculus. The pressure in my chest had been building all morning, tight and compressed, like someone had wrapped Christmas ribbon around my ribcage. "You okay?" Sienna's fork paused midair. "You look really pale." I showed her my watch. The heart rate graph looked like a seismograph during an earthquake. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through the notifications. "Natalia, this is seriously not normal. You need to see someone." "I will," I promised, though I wasn't sure when. Nutcracker performances start tomorrow, 3 shows over the weekend, then Christmas preparations. After the holidays. That's a week away. What if something's actually wrong? Another chest flutter stole my breath. "I'll go to the health center after lunch." The university's health center smelled like antiseptic and pine air freshener. I attended a performing arts high school connected to the local university, which meant access to their health services. The waiting room had a sad little Christmas tree decorated with health awareness ornaments. The nurse who called me back was around 40 with short blonde hair. Her name tag read Christine Holloway, RN. She barely glanced up from her computer. "What can I help you with?" I held out my wrist, showing her my current heart rate of 181. "I've been getting these warnings for almost a week. My heart rate keeps jumping everywhere and my chest feels really tight." She looked at my watch for maybe 3 seconds. "Those things aren't medical devices. They're designed to make anxious people panic. You're fine." I pulled out my phone, showing her 6 days of data, dozens of irregular rhythm notifications, heart rate patterns completely unlike my normal baseline. "But it never did this before. Something changed." She waved dismissively without really looking. Smartwatches have an incredibly high false positive rate for arrhythmia detection. Every student comes in thinking they're dying because their watch told them so. My chest tightened further. But my chest really hurts, and I get dizzy when I stand up. Yesterday during rehearsal, I almost passed out. She finally turned from her computer with a look that said I was being dramatic. "You're a dancer, correct? You're probably dehydrated. It's winter, the air is dry, you're rehearsing. That's physically demanding. Add in semester stress, and of course your body is reacting. Can you at least check my blood pressure? Listen to my heart?" Nurse Holloway sighed like I'd asked for emergency surgery. She grabbed the blood pressure cuff with unnecessary force, wrapping it around my arm while staring at the clock. The cuff inflated and deflated. 118/76. Perfectly normal. "See, you're fine." She turned back to her computer. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. These devices create health anxiety in young people. You've worked yourself into such a state that you've convinced yourself something's wrong when you're completely healthy."
But what if it's not anxiety? What if something's actually wrong? Now she looked genuinely annoyed. "Listen, I've been doing this for 15 years. I see dozens of students weekly who think they're having a medical emergency because they found something on WebMD or their fitness tracker sent an alert. 99% of the time, it's nothing. You are 18 years old. 18-year-olds don't have heart problems. They have stress problems." She stood up, clearly done. If you're still feeling anxious after Christmas break, we can discuss a counseling referral. But right now, you need to stop obsessing over your watch, stop Googling symptoms, and focus on your performances. Break a leg with Nutcracker. I walked out, feeling worse than when I'd entered. The chest tightness hadn't eased. My watch buzzed again. Irregular rhythm detected. I silenced it and headed back to class, wondering if maybe she was right. Maybe I was just stressed. Except the symptoms had started before I'd even noticed the watch warnings. But Nurse Holloway was the medical professional. 15 years of experience. Surely she knew better than a scared teenager with a smartphone. I tried focusing on AP Government, but my heart kept stuttering, making me lose my breath. By dance rehearsal at 4, I felt wrung out and exhausted. Our instructor, Madame Volkova, was a former professional ballerina who ran rehearsals like military operations. No phones, no smartwatches visible, absolute focus. I tucked my watch under my sleeve and tried concentrating on choreography. We were running the snow scene, one of the most physically demanding sections. Constant movement, endless turns, jumps that left me breathless even on good days. Today felt impossible. 15 minutes in, my vision started tunneling. The studio lights seemed too bright, then too dim. I could feel my heart hammering irregularly, missing beats, racing, stuttering. I grabbed the bar for support. "Natalia, you're off count." Madame Volkova's sharp voice cut through the music. Again, from the top. We reset. I pushed through the combination, but my legs felt disconnected, like I was controlling them remotely with a failing signal. My chest hurt with each breath, each jump, each turn. Sienna danced beside me. I saw concern flash across her face as she registered how pale I must look. But we couldn't stop, not during Madame Volkova's rehearsals. The music swelled. We moved into the final section, quick turns that made the room spin. I pushed through 2, 3, 4 rotations, and then my heart did something it had never done before. It stopped. Not slowed, not skipped, stopped. I felt it happen. This horrible, empty sensation where the beating should be. My vision went dark at the edges. I reached for the bar, missed, and felt myself falling. Sienna caught me before I hit the floor, lowering me down as my legs gave out. The music stopped abruptly. Madame Volkova's face appeared above me, her usual stern expression replaced with panic. "Natalia, can you hear me? Someone call 911. I wanted to tell them I was okay, but I couldn't make my mouth work. My body was convulsing without permission, muscles seizing and releasing in waves I couldn't control. Somewhere distant, I heard screaming, feet running, voices shouting. "She's having a seizure!" "No, check her pulse. Her heart stopped. Someone help her." Madame Volkova's hands were on my neck, searching for a pulse. Her face went white. "No pulse. She's not breathing. Irina, get the AED from the office. Now." She started chest compressions on the studio floor, counting out loud in Russian. "Один, два, три, четыре." Each compression sent shockwaves through my body. I could feel it happening but couldn't respond, couldn't tell her I was still conscious somehow, still aware despite my heart not beating. Irina came running back with the AED. They cut open my leotard and sports bra, stuck the pads on my bare chest. The device started speaking in that calm, automated voice. Analyzing heart rhythm. Do not touch the patient.
I was trapped inside my body, conscious but unable to move or breathe, while everyone tried to save my life. It was the most terrifying thing I'd ever experienced. Shock advised, stand clear. The jolt of electricity through my chest was indescribable. Every muscle contracted at once, my back arching off the floor. Then, nothing. Continue CPR. Madame Volkova resumed compressions, tears streaming down her face. Other dancers were crying, some filming on phones, others calling parents. The studio had descended into chaos. Then, suddenly, I could breathe. My lungs pulled in air with a horrible gasping sound. My heart stuttered back to life, beating wrong, erratic and chaotic, but beating. "She's back!" Sienna was sobbing, gripping my hand. "Nat, stay with us. Please stay with us." I tried to tell her I wasn't going anywhere, but my throat was raw, my voice gone. The world was making sense again, sounds becoming clearer, my body slowly responding.
I could wiggle my fingers, feel the cold floor, hear approaching sirens. Paramedics burst through the doors with equipment and urgent voices. They attached electrodes to my chest, connected me to a monitor that started beeping frantically. One of the paramedics, a tall black man with graying temples, looked at the monitor and his expression shifted. VFib. She's in VFib. Charging to 200. Another paramedic held paddles. Clear. My body arched off the floor as electricity coursed through me. The monitor beeped differently. Still in VFib. Charging to 300. Clear. Another shock. This time I felt it, this horrible sensation of my chest exploding and contracting simultaneously. The monitor's pattern changed. Sinus rhythm, we've got her back. Let's move. They loaded me onto a stretcher and ran toward the ambulance. I saw dancers lining the hallway, most crying, phones out recording. I saw Madame Volkova with her hand over her mouth, her leotard stained with my blood from compression so hard she'd broken skin. I saw Sienna following the stretcher, absolutely hysterical. The ambulance doors slammed shut and we were moving. The paramedics worked with practiced efficiency, inserting an IV, attaching monitors, calling ahead. 18-year-old female, sudden cardiac arrest during dance rehearsal, shocked 4 times total, currently stable but needs immediate cardiology consult. The emergency room was organized chaos. Doctors and nurses swarmed, shouting medical terms. Someone was asking questions, my name, the date, did anything hurt, but my throat was too raw for more than a raspy whisper. A doctor with warm brown eyes and silver-streaked black hair leaned over me. I'm Dr. Patel. You're at University Medical Center. You had a cardiac arrest. Your heart stopped. Do you understand? I nodded weakly. We're going to run tests to figure out why this happened. You're going to be okay, but we need to understand what's going on. Do you have any history of heart problems? Any family history? Family history. The words triggered something in my foggy brain. My dad's sister, Aunt Melissa. She'd died young, mid-20s. I'd been too young to remember her, but I'd heard my grandmother mention her with devastating sadness, how she'd just collapsed one day, how they couldn't save her. My aunt, Dad's sister, she died, heart thing, she was 24. Dr. Patel's expression changed immediately. She turned to a nurse. Get me a full cardiac panel, genetic testing, EKG, and echocardiogram. Page Dr. Morrison from cardiology. I need him here now. They wheeled me through tests. An echocardiogram, where a technician pressed an ultrasound wand against my chest, and I watched my heart beating on screen. An EKG with electrodes everywhere, printing long strips showing my heart's electrical activity. Blood draws, so many blood draws, my arms ended up covered in cotton balls and tape. Through it all, I kept thinking about Nurse Holloway's face, how certain she was that I was fine, how she'd dismissed my smartwatch as an anxiety generator, how confident she'd been in her 15 years of experience that she hadn't bothered actually examining me.
If Madame Volkova hadn't known CPR, if the studio hadn't had an AED, I would have died. And Nurse Holloway would have written in her notes that I'd just been an anxious student with a smartwatch. My parents arrived while I was being wheeled back from imaging. Mom was crying before she reached my bed, grabbing my hand like she could anchor me to life through physical touch. Dad stood at the foot, his face gray, jaw clenched tight. What happened? His voice was rough. The school said your heart stopped. How does an 18-year-old's heart just stop? I told them everything. The watch notifications I'd ignored for a week, the building symptoms, going to Nurse Holloway and being dismissed, collapsing during rehearsal. Mom's tears turned to fury. You told the nurse something was wrong and she sent you back to class? She sent you back when your heart was failing? We need to talk to her, Dad said, his hand tightening on the bed rail. We need to talk to the university. This is unacceptable. Dr. Morrison, the cardiologist, arrived before my parents could storm out. He was younger than expected, maybe early 40s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He pulled up a chair and opened a tablet showing images of my heart. Natalia, I'm going to explain what's happening. Your heart structure looks completely normal. Chambers are the right size, valves working correctly. Everything looks fine anatomically. But your heart's electrical system is malfunctioning. He pulled up an EKG strip with colored markings. Based on your symptoms, family history, and these results, I believe you have long QT syndrome. It's a genetic condition affecting how your heart's electrical signals work. He zoomed in on a section. Your heart has its own electrical system controlling when it beats. In long QT syndrome, the electrical signal takes too long to reset between beats. This QT interval, he pointed, should be around 400 milliseconds. Yours is measuring 580 milliseconds. That's significantly prolonged. My mother made a choking sound. My father's face went grayer. Dr. Morrison continued, his voice steady and calm despite the devastating information he was delivering. This prolonged QT interval makes you vulnerable to dangerous arrhythmias. The irregular rhythm you were feeling was your heart trying to beat normally, but getting confused by faulty electrical signals. Eventually, it went into ventricular fibrillation, VFib, which is when the heart just quivers instead of pumping. Without immediate intervention, it's fatal. But you can treat it, right? There's something you can do. Yes, absolutely. Dr. Morrison's expression softened. Now that we know what's wrong, we can manage it. You'll need an implantable cardioverter defibrillator, an ICD. It's similar to a pacemaker, but it also shocks your heart if it goes into a dangerous rhythm. We'll also start you on beta blockers to help regulate your heart rate. An ICD, a device implanted in my chest that would shock my heart if it stopped again. I was 18 years old, a week away from Christmas, supposed to be dancing in the Nutcracker this weekend. Instead, I was talking about permanent cardiac devices. Will I be able to dance again? The question came out smaller than I intended. Dr. Morrison hesitated, and I knew the answer before he spoke. Contact activities and high-intensity athletics aren't recommended with long QT syndrome and an ICD. The device sits just under your skin, and impacts could damage it. The intense physical exertion could also trigger arrhythmias even with the device and medication. My dream of Juilliard evaporated in that moment. Years of training, thousands of hours in the studio, my entire identity built around being a dancer, gone. I couldn't even cry. The devastation was too massive to process. Dad finally spoke, his voice thick. My sister, Melissa, she died at 24. Sudden cardiac arrest. Is this the same thing? Dr. Morrison nodded gravely. Yes, very likely yes. Long QT syndrome is genetic, inherited. If one family member has sudden cardiac death at a young age, there's a significant chance others carry the gene.
Your entire immediate family should be screened. Parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, anyone who shares Natalia's genetics. He turned back to me. Your aunt probably had the same symptoms you did. Irregular heartbeats, maybe chest discomfort. But 15 years ago, we didn't have smartwatches giving people cardiac data. She might not have realized anything was wrong until it was too late. Your watch probably saved your life by alerting you something was wrong, even if the nurse didn't listen. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Nurse Holloway had called my smartwatch an anxiety generator, but it had been trying to warn me I had a life-threatening cardiac condition. Without it, I might have just collapsed at home, like Aunt Melissa, with no one trained in CPR nearby, no AED available. The surgery to implant the ICD was scheduled for the next morning. Dr. Morrison explained they'd make an incision below my collarbone, create a pocket in the tissue, and insert the device. Then they'd thread wires through my veins directly into my heart chambers. The device would constantly monitor my heart rhythm and deliver shocks if needed. The surgery would take about 2 hours. I'd have a visible scar, a noticeable bump under my skin. I'd set off metal detectors for the rest of my life, and I'd never dance professionally again. That night in the hospital, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt that horrible sensation of my heart stopping.
the emptiness in my chest, the terror of being conscious but unable to control my body. A nurse came in hourly to check vitals, the blood pressure cuff inflating automatically. At 2 in the morning, my phone started buzzing with notifications, text messages, dozens of them. I opened my phone to messages from Sienna, from other dancers, from people I barely knew. Someone had posted phone footage of me collapsing at rehearsal. The video showed me falling, Madame Volkova doing compressions, the AED shocking me. It was spreading through social media rapidly. Most messages were supportive, but some were morbidly curious. One from an unknown number said simply, "That nurse should be in jail." I clicked a link someone sent to the university's anonymous confession page. The post already had over 400 comments. Students were sharing stories about Nurse Holloway dismissing their medical concerns. A girl with type 1 diabetes said Holloway accused her of faking low blood sugar to skip class. A guy with severe asthma said she'd refused to let him use his inhaler during an attack, insisting it was just anxiety. Story after story of students being dismissed, belittled, sent away when they needed help. The pattern was undeniable. I'd just been the first one whose heart literally stopped. The surgery went smoothly, though I felt terrible afterward. The incision throbbed with deep, persistent pain that barely touched. I could feel the device under my skin, foreign and intrusive. Dr. Morrison tested it before I left the OR, deliberately triggering an arrhythmia to ensure the ICD would respond. I felt the shock, a brief, painful jolt, and then my heart corrected itself. "Perfect," Dr. Morrison said with satisfaction. "If your heart goes into VFib again, the device will shock you automatically. Most patients describe it as feeling like being kicked by a horse. It's not pleasant, but it's better than dying." Better than dying. That was my life now. I spent 4 more days in the hospital. My parents barely left. Dad made calls to lawyers, while Mom alternated between crying and raging about Nurse Holloway's negligence. Sienna visited daily, bringing assignments I couldn't focus on, and updates about how the dance department had canceled the remaining Nutcracker performances out of respect. They'd placed Nurse Holloway on administrative leave. The university issued a bland statement about taking student safety seriously and conducting a thorough investigation. But everyone knew what that meant. They were trying to avoid a lawsuit.
My parents hired a lawyer named Victoria Chen, a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in medical malpractice. She filed suit against both Nurse Holloway personally and the university health system. The complaint detailed everything: my repeated attempts to get help, the documented symptoms, the smartwatch data showing clear cardiac distress, Holloway's complete failure to perform even basic assessment, her dismissal without checking my pulse manually or listening to my heart. Victoria said she'd never seen such a clear-cut case. Any first-year nursing student could tell you that a patient presenting with chest pain and irregular heartbeat needs cardiac assessment. She did nothing. Worse than nothing, she actively prevented you from seeking appropriate care by reassuring you nothing was wrong. Discovery revealed documents that made everything worse. Nurse Holloway had documented my visit, but her notes created a false narrative. According to her records, I'd come in with vague health anxiety related to wearable technology. She'd assessed me as alert and oriented, no visible distress, vital signs within normal limits. She concluded I was experiencing health-related anxiety, recommend counseling services. No mention of chest pain, no documentation of irregular heartbeat, no record of the concerning data I'd shown her. If I'd died, those notes would have been her defense. But Victoria subpoenaed the university's IT records and found something damning. After I'd left her office, Nurse Holloway had spent 17 minutes Googling Apple Watch false positive cardiac and teenage health anxiety smartwatch. She'd been trying to validate her diagnosis after the fact, looking for information to support her decision rather than reconsidering whether she'd been wrong. If she'd truly been confident in her assessment, she wouldn't have needed to research it afterward. She'd known she might have made a mistake, and instead of calling me back or alerting anyone, she tried to reassure herself. Christmas came and went while I was still recovering. We didn't do our usual elaborate dinner. I couldn't eat much anyway, the pain medication making me nauseous. We opened presents in my hospital room on Christmas morning, the sad little tree Dad had brought in looking pathetic under the fluorescent lights. I got clothes I might never wear, gift cards to places I couldn't go, a new ballet bag I'd never use. Mom gave me a necklace with a small heart pendant. She cried while putting it on me. Because your heart is strong. Because you survived. I was discharged 2 days after Christmas with strict instructions. Take beta blockers twice daily, no strenuous activity, follow up with cardiology weekly, attend all physical therapy appointments, watch for signs of infection around the incision site, carry an ICD identification card at all times. The lawsuit moved forward aggressively. The university tried to settle early, offering $200,000 and an admission that care could have been improved. Victoria rejected it immediately. They're trying to avoid discovery. They know what we'll find. What we found was a pattern of negligence the university had documented and ignored. 3 formal complaints about Nurse Holloway in the previous 6 years, all regarding dismissive treatment of students. The university had done nothing except require her to attend 1 continuing education seminar. They'd been aware of a pattern and failed to act. The university's risk manager testified during depositions that they'd considered replacing Holloway, but decided against it because she was close to retirement and finding qualified healthcare providers was difficult. They literally calculated that occasional lawsuits would be cheaper than hiring someone new. That statement became central to the punitive damages claim. Meanwhile, my senior year continued without me for the first few weeks. I couldn't face going back immediately, not with the media attention, not with everyone knowing what happened. By the time I returned in mid-January, the viral video had mostly faded, though kids definitely remembered.
Walking through campus, I felt everyone's eyes on the visible bump of my ICD under my shirt. Some students stared, others whispered. A few approached to tell me they were glad I was okay, or to share their own stories of being dismissed by Nurse Holloway. The university had hired a new nurse, a competent-seeming woman named Sarah Kim, who seemed terrified I'd collapse on her watch. Classes were harder now. I'd missed so much material. The beta blockers made me exhausted constantly. I fell asleep in afternoon lectures, my body heavy and slow. I couldn't take dance classes anymore. Doctor's orders. I'd sit in the student center while my former classmates had technique class, watching through the windows as they did combinations I'd never do again. Being a dancer had been my identity. Now I was just the girl who'd gone viral, dying on camera. The state nursing board opened their own investigation into Nurse Holloway's license. They held a hearing in February. My parents testified about finding out their daughter had died in a dance studio, about the genetic condition that had killed my aunt, now manifesting in me. The board watched the hospital security footage showing me arriving in V-fib, watched the cell phone video of me collapsing and receiving CPR. Holloway sat at the defendant's table, forced to watch the consequences of her negligence. When asked directly if she believed she'd provided appropriate care, she consulted her lawyer before answering. I made a reasonable clinical judgment based on the information available. The board member's expression hardened. The appropriate answer was no. After 3 hours of deliberation, the board revoked her license effective immediately. She could petition for reinstatement in 5 years, but she'd have to complete additional education and prove she'd remediated her deficiencies. The board chair read a statement explaining that her failure to perform basic assessment on a patient with cardiac symptoms fell below acceptable standards of care.
The civil trial started in April. I had to miss classes to attend, sitting in the courtroom while lawyers argued about my life. Victoria's opening statement was devastating. She walked the jury through everything chronologically, showed them my scars, had Dr. Morrison testify about long QT syndrome and how easily it could have been detected with proper assessment. The university's defense argued I hadn't adequately communicated the severity of my symptoms. Victoria countered that I'd explicitly reported chest pain, irregular heartbeat, and dizziness, textbook cardiac emergency symptoms that any competent nurse should recognize. Testimony lasted 8 days. Witnesses described Holloway's pattern of dismissive care. The risk manager squirmed on the stand. Dr. Patel described how close I'd come to permanent brain damage. My parents broke down recounting the moment they got the call that their daughter had died in a dance studio, about the genetic condition that had killed my aunt, now manifesting in me. Holloway took the stand and apologized, but Victoria's cross-examination was merciless. She'd admitted Googling information after I left, admitted she'd been concerned enough to research, but not concerned enough to call me back, admitted chest pain plus irregular heartbeat typically warranted cardiac assessment. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning their verdict. In favor of plaintiff. Compensatory damages, $1.2 million. Punitive damages against Holloway, $800,000. Punitive damages against the university, $6.5 million. Total, $8.5 million. 6 months after the trial, my parents launched the Melissa Rivera Foundation for Cardiac Awareness in Young Adults, named after my aunt. The foundation offered free cardiac screenings for teens and young adults, educational programs for healthcare providers about not dismissing young patients, and advocacy for better emergency preparedness in schools and universities. Mom ran it full-time. Victoria joined as legal counsel pro bono. They partnered with Apple to study smartwatch cardiac detection accuracy in young populations. The foundation has screened over 10,000 young people so far. They've identified 43 cases of undiagnosed long QT syndrome and other cardiac conditions. 43 people who might have died suddenly, like Aunt Melissa.